Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on Family Counsel's Charting a Course for Future Success. I'm Andrew Kite, the Executive Director of the Family Business Center of Loyola University Chicago at the Quinlan School of Business and President of FBN USA. Today we have a great session on family counsels with Randy Scott from Scott Family Services. And Scott, I will let Randy talk a little bit more about his family and his business. But before we get into Randy's presentation, I thought I would give a little bit of context for our listeners around the concept of a family counsel, because some people use family counsel as a term in different ways. So we'll talk a little bit about why we have family counsels and the term itself. So next slide, please, Ryan. The essence of a family counsel is that it's a group that's put together to manage the complexity that we all encounter in family business. We have a family system, an ownership system, and a management system with varying degrees of overlap. And a family counsel can help us manage this complexity and the different roles that we play as family members, owners, and managers in our family businesses, and to keep the family and ownership issues from distracting management from what they're doing in the business, and have an organized way for the family to communicate on the family and ownership side. Next slide, please. Now, you know that each of these systems has a different value and logic to it, which is another layer of complexity. So the family system is based on loyalty. It's a stable system built on stability and maintaining stability. A business system is obviously more of a meritocracy, and an ownership system is more focused on building wealth. So a family counsel can help manage the different values and logic and make sure that when we're talking about a family issue, we're talking based on our family roles. When we're talking about a business issue, we're talking based on our business roles. And when we're talking about an ownership issue, we're talking about it from our ownership perspective. Next slide, please. Another layer of complexity that a family counsel helps us manage is the growing complexity of a family. You know, in the first generation, you have two people typically, and an age gap between 1 and 5 years between the husband and wife. By the time you get to third and fourth generations, you have age spans where the oldest in one generation has more in common with the generation before them than they do with people in their own generation. So you have in-laws coming into the equation as well. And all of that adds to the layer of complexity in communication, diversity in the family, as well as diversity of values and opinions. And we have to manage that communication as a family, because we know that if we don't manage it and we don't address problems when they occur, they generally get worse. So a family counsel is one tool that can be used to do that. Next slide, please. And all of this is with the goal of building ownership unity and family cohesion, because we know that this is a family business's greatest strategic advantage. And all of this is to improve the possibility of longevity for both our families and our businesses. Next slide, please. Again, many of you have heard me talk about this before, but the family unity piece that we're talking about is based on research that looked at family businesses that have survived for over 200 years. And what it found was that those families had 4 different dimensions to their level of connection with each other: family emotional, business emotional, family financial, and business financial. By family emotional, we're talking about their basic family emotional attachment to each other, knowing each other, caring for each other, etc. Business emotional is the sense of pride, identity, and status that a family has in being connected to their business and what the business means to the family. Family financial is the use of family finances to take care of and satisfy the financial needs of family members, and business financial is cohesion that's based on the success of the business itself, its performance over time. And of course, what this research showed was that the financial variables only keep a family connected for the short term, that for true connection and identity and success across generations, you need to invest in the family emotional and business emotional connections. And the family council takes on a lot of that role in building that family emotional and business emotional connection. Next slide, please. And by cohesion, I mean a feeling of unity that leads to a common sense of purpose and joint action. And it's giving family members a high desire to remain in the group and a low desire to leave the group. And obviously, you can use money to keep people in the group, but that, again, that only lasts for a short period of time. So you don't want people feeling coerced into being a part of the family or the business, and you don't want people feeling held hostage like they can't leave and do other things. And all of that is to say that what we're trying to do and the objective of family councils are about managing communication and building a sense of unity that leads to common purpose and joint action. Next slide. So we all have a family governance system, and as a family business grows in complexity, you move from informal to formal. So family meetings are the regular meetings that we have with the entire family. Some people also use the term family assembly for that. And some families even use the term family council for the meeting of the entire family. As I'm going to use the term family council here today, a family council is a representative group. When the family becomes too large, you have a representative group of the family that moves the business of the family forward when you can't get everybody together on a regular basis. So it's typically an elected body that represents the family and the family goals and initiatives moving forward. Family meetings are generally the annual family meetings that families have. Some families are small enough that you can still get everybody together, so they don't need to move to the family council stage and have the representative governance structure. So they can get away with just having the family meet as a whole. The family council, of course, is a representative governance structure for those families that are more complex. Next slide, please. But the key family council question when setting up our representative structure is, what structure will help us improve communication and build unity for this generation and the next? I use that as a foundational question to help family members think about, what does our family council need to look like to build unity for this generation and the next, and to improve communication? Next slide, please. So a few of the questions that families typically ask is, how do we define the purpose of the family council so that everybody is clear on that? Who could be a member? What are their qualifications? What do we expect of the members of the family council? Is there going to be a leadership group to the family council? Is there going to be a chairperson? What are the terms of the family council members? Next slide, please. How are we going to select them? Are we going to compensate them? And how does the family council relate to the board and other governance structures? And will we have committees? But all of these are just some of the key questions that families ask when creating family councils. So before I hand it over to Randy, I just wanted to remind all of you that you have a dialog box in your upper right-hand corner. And in there's a little box that says chat. And if you have questions that you would like us to ask of Randy, or you have of me, you can type your questions into that dialog box, and we will answer those when we get to the question and answer phase towards the end of the program. So with this, I'd like to hand the presentation over to Randy Scott, who is the chair of Scott Family Services and the Scott Family Council. The Scott family has been involved with the Family Business Center for probably about 10 years now, and Randy's a graduate of our Next Generation Leadership Institute, and a member of the Scott family has gone through our Family Business Stewardship Institute as well. So they're a very developed family, and I think you'll enjoy the story. So Randy, why don't you take it from here?
Thank you. Listening to talk, Randy reminded me a lot of these things that we did at the NGLI, and some of the comments I was going to make, so I appreciate it. I am the oldest of the third generation. We have 5 members of our second generation, and we have all of them have survived. We've lost 2 spouses over the last 4 years, but all of the second generation survived. The first generation passed 93 and 2000. We have 19 members of our third generation, and ages range from myself at 58 to the youngest is about 25, so there's a big difference in the age of the third. And then our fourth generation ranges from about 35 years old down to, I think we're down to about 1 year old. So there's about 85 in our family at this time. So we have 3 different enterprises. We've got the Family Counsel that I will be talking about. We have a banking operation that is in Montana, Wyoming, and in the Black Hills of South Dakota that we started. My grandfather started that in 1968. We have a ranching operation that he started in 1943 that's in Montana, Wyoming. And both of those businesses are very much alive and thriving. The Family Counsel is there, as I said. We also have 2 foundations that we have. One is a corporate foundation for the bank, and we also have a family foundation that my grandparents started that the family is involved with. So I guess that's a little bit about myself. Next slide. Our Family Counsel history, we started in 1998 at a family reunion. Andrew was talking about family meetings, family reunions, and we never had a family reunion before. My grandfather died a week before the family reunion, so we decided to go ahead and have the family reunion with his funeral at the same time. But our idea was that the Family Counsel was going to represent the family and the businesses at some point. But when we first started it, it was strictly about family harmony. And the family decided that the second generation used to have meetings, that the family members used to have a meeting at Thanksgiving and Christmas time where all the family would be there. And then my grandfather would say, okay, everybody out of the room, just the family members. So he took his 5 kids, and they discussed the business side. The spouses were not allowed. So one of the first concepts we had was to make sure that we wanted our spouses to be included with what we did. So that's how we kind of started the Family Counsel, with including the spouses. Next slide, Ryan. We started with John Ward. John Ward has been around the Chicago area for quite a while. Some people may know him. And we brought him in back in the late 90s to help us to establish Family Counsel. We learned that, a couple of us learned that you need to start doing work in advance if you have a desire to keep your family enterprises going for the future. You can't just let it happen. It's sometimes successful, but it very seldom is. So we need to do a lot of work. We decided that our enterprises were important enough that we were going to go ahead and do what it took to give us the ability to transfer that from the second generation down to the third generation. John was able to create a lot of structure, a lot of strategy for us. We put together the Family Counsel, and as I said, the first 2 years that we had the Family Counsel, all it was interested in doing was the family harmony. The enterprises that we had would be controlled by an ownership committee, and the ownership committee was only second generation. So they felt that the rest of the family could help with the harmony part of it, but they would continue to run the businesses. It was kind of a compromise because the second generation, and we still have some disagreements today, but the second generation thought that the business side was something that they had put all their time and energy into, so they wanted to maintain their control over that. Next slide, please. In 2001, the family said, if these enterprises are important enough to us that we want to consider these going into the next generation, the Family Counsel needs to take some sort of control over these enterprises. So we redid our Family Counsel in 2001 and included a high-level oversight of our enterprises. At that time, the big part of that was just to really define how family members for directors would take place. Later on, we found that one of John's books talked about parallel planning, and that's how the goals and desires of the family would interact with the goals and desires of the enterprises. And we included that later on as a direct report of the Family Counsel. Next page. On the success side, the family enterprises are still operating. The bank did an IPO in 2010. It was the first IPO in 3 years for a financial institution, and we just were able to do it at the right time. But it was one of the things that we needed to be able to do as a family. We thought it's important for our officers and directors to have an opportunity to be able to sell, buy shares of stock in the company that they were working for. It also increased our desire for family history. We did not really do a lot of work with family history, and the Family Counsel was able to help with family history, promoting it, talking about it, discussing it. We did education programs primarily for our third and fourth generation. Of our third and fourth generation ones, this education, we originally had, the original concept was to help them personally and professionally with education. 3 of our 5 enterprises, we now have a third generation member in place. The 2 foundations, it was the sign. So the 2 people, myself and my cousin, my uncle said, would you chair that? So there was no real definition of how that was going to take place. The Family Counsel has been a different matter. Going from Jim to myself has probably been 3 years in this process of doing it. But I think the other deal is that we have committed, unified, knowledgeable shareholders is kind of the code word that we use for what the Family Counsel is supposed to provide. Next slide. On the challenges side, we did put a lot of structure in. We didn't really understand the structure. Andrew talked about some of those things that, and his part of it, but we were still beginning at this part. It didn't make a lot of sense to us. But as we got into the length of time that we had, it became more obvious what we were doing, why we were doing it, why he had helped us to do some of those things. And the other thing that was a big challenge for us is how to establish a process for something if you don't have a process to base it on. And again, we didn't really quite understand that. We just thought we were making decisions. And then we had an incident that took place in 2003 about one of the processes we put in place that sounded good. And all of a sudden, we have family members complaining about it. So it became the concept of a case study, which some of you may have heard about. So the case study is out there, and it really helped us to understand more about the responsibilities that we were doing. We can't just make a quick decision. It takes time to make the right decisions because you're talking about 85 family members, not about a small group of individuals. The other challenge we've had is funding. We talk about education. How do we pay for that? We have the company pays for part of our funding, but we also, as Andrew talked about, we also have a small compensation for our Family Counsel members. It's about $5,000 per person, so it's not a lot of money, but it has to come from someplace. And does the family pay for that? Does the company pay for that? Is there a reason that how much of that should be paid for by each one of them? Next page, please. The other part of the challenge was developing the trust in the system for the families. And right now, we really kind of understand that we have 3 types of members. We have the people that don't really, they will participate, but they're not really involved to the same extent that the other 2 groups are. We have a group of people that are involved, that like to help, they want to be participating at all times, and we have the other group of leaders. So we have to try to find what the right balance is and involvement for each one of those groups. The one family concept was very difficult for the second generation. The one family concept is you do everything on a family. No longer are you looking at branch representation to be on the enterprise business boards, for example. You pick the most qualified people and put them on there, trusting that that person is working for all of the family. And that led to our case study that time where the second generation, they talked that they understood the one family concept, but it didn't really strike home until we actually had an ability to offer another board seat to another third generation person, and they all wanted their child included in that deal. So that whole one family concept, very difficult for the second generation to grasp. Third generation, it's somewhat difficult, but it's easier, and by the fourth generation, it's not a problem. And we don't celebrate our successes. We get past a goal, we get it done, we move on to the next part, and we forget about celebrating, so we don't realize how far along we have come all the time. Next page. The Family Counsel to us is important because it allows the family to understand that our enterprises are there for the long run. We have these parallel planning meetings, and we take a feeling temperature of the family. Do we want to own this company for the next 3 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road? And if we say that this is a long term, then our family members can look at, they'll be comfortable in working for it, or they look forward to a management position. On the enterprise side of it, it's important to them because if they know that this is a long-term play by the family, then they can plan for the long term. They don't have to focus on a quarter-to-quarter basis. They have the support of the majority shareholders to develop things for the long term. It may not pay out for the next 2 or 3 years, but 10 years down the road, this could be a major decision. So they can look long term and not focus on quarterly. Next page. Kind of the rules of order that we went through, as I said, 99. You can see the summary of some of the things we did. In 2001, we decided on that one family concept is we'd have the most qualified people serving as directors, and that's caused some concern that to be the most qualified, what does it take to do that? And if you have more than 2 people applying for one position, how do you decide on that one person to be the most qualified? So that's been kind of a tough one for us, but we're still working within that most qualified. They all have definitions and qualifications they have to have, but it's difficult for new people to move into those positions if you have older people that are most qualified because they've been there longer. So it does cause problems. And then because we have term limits, we've always had term limits of 2 3-year terms. It really creates a very difficult ability for the so-called future leaders to be able to develop that leadership position if they're going to be out of there in 3 or 6 years. So in 2005, we redefined the term limits for our chair and vice chair and allowed them to stay as long as they're in a chair or vice chair position. Next page, please. Our family council decisions, obviously family harmony is a big part of it. How do we get along with each other? We have family meetings. We have an annual meeting with the whole family every year. No business is conducted just to have fun. We do that at the ranch just so everybody can experience the ranch and see all the environmental things that take place, what all takes place on the ranch, because we don't have a lot of people that work on the ranch. Family development and family education, we wanted to help originally both personal and professional. As we've defined our funding into more of the company, the enterprise is paying for education, we've had to limit our family development and education to business side. So if you want to be in the ranching business, banking business, the development in that area, we can help you. If you want to have a greenhouse or a music studio, there's not much we can help you with because our fees are coming from the expenses is coming from the income is coming from the company. We do the feed that you see there is a family enterprise education dinner. We do those 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. We have about 90% of our family members still live within the 2 communities of Billings, Montana, Sheridan, Wyoming, and we're able to take an education meeting and we have a little bit of celebration of family. We do a dinner, and then we spend an hour and a half on education on different topics throughout whatever needs to be developed at that time. We've done the enterprise board directors for non-second generation. We've come up with the process of doing it. We've been doing that for about 10 years now. Parallel planning, we've been working on that. Started in 2005 was our first big time we used it, and we're right in the process of doing another parallel planning process for our bank at this time. The other thing we did was created Scott Family Services. Scott Family Services, if you go ahead and you can turn the page there, but Scott Family Services was designed by people to help us do the jobs that we were supposed to be doing for the family. The problem with Scott Family Services is that it's a Montana corporation. Originally, it was funded by Jim's credit card. We had 3 or 4 people in that office. We did not have a way of really taking care of it, paying for it. So Jim paid for it with a credit card, and then he'd get his money back as people would pay for their personal and professional services. So we made it a professional organization. We made it a Montana corporation. We have created our own bylaws for it. It does the personal and professional services for the family, all the tax, estate planning, that type of stuff. And because of the IPO, it is now our family, does all the family shareholder relationships for the bank for our family members. So as family members want to buy, sell, trade shares, educate on the issues of what's taking place with the bank, the Scott Family Services does that. So that's a division under the Family Counsel to help the Family Counsel do its work with the family. Next page. The enterprise decisions, just like any other business, they manage the CEO, the budget, the policies, and then they review the parallel plan with the family members. So we do not get, as the Family Counsel, do not control the enterprises. Their board, their CEO continue to do what they're paid to do. But as the largest shareholder or the owner of the company, the bank or ranch, they do want to listen to what that primary shareholder has to say and try to do what they can to fit within their goals and wishes, desires of the family. Risk, growth, liquidity, profitability are the four major areas that the family has control over. They pass that on to the enterprise, but in the enterprise, if it works, they can do it. They will tell us why they can't do it if it doesn't fit in with what the bank or ranch is doing at that time. So we do not interfere as the Family Counsel with the enterprises. We're there to explain the wishes of the family, and they're able to work within that those constraints. Next page. The difference between the Family Counsel and our enterprises, all of our family enterprises boards have independent board members. They're all primarily independent. We have a majority of independent board members. We do not have an independent board member on our Family Counsel. We're looking at that could be changing. The other one, as I talked about on the one family concept, that one member, one vote. We don't care if you've got 1 million shares of bank stock and the other person has 1 share on the family side of it. If you're a member, you have 1 vote. So everybody is created equal. On the Family Counsel, we recommend that each branch have a representative. Unlike everything else, we still want the most qualified of your family to be there. But as it manages the family, we want to have a representative from each branch on that Family Counsel. Next one, please. The Scott family values are very simple. I will say that one of the first things we did not have our family values in place. The bank had their own values. As we looked at our values after we completed them, we went back and compared those to our enterprise of the bank and then created the ones for the ranch. If the values match, that it makes a lot of sense that that business is something that you should be proud of. If the values don't match, if your enterprise and your family values don't match, why are you doing it? If you have a conflict with what those values are. We thought our first step at that would just be the bolded part that you read there, the dark print. We would not have the definition behind it. Everybody might have a different definition of what creativity meant to them. 4 or 5 years after we created the list, we did go through and the decision of the family was to define that so everybody could really see what the family's definition of those values were. We added health right in the middle. Health was not one of our original values. That came in later because the bank and the ranch both had health as one of their values in there. We thought that was important that the family do the same thing. So we did add that at a later time. Next one, please. On the director qualifications, we were very careful for that. We've got, I think there's 4 pages that you'll see here. We wanted and I'm not going to go through all of them, but we wanted the directors to be taking the family's interests to the board. We know that we are a minority on that board. We are the majority shareholder, but we want to make sure that these people the people that are on those boards are working towards the one family concept, that they're trying to make sure that they're doing the right thing for everybody in the family. So next page. Give you a chance to look at those as we go through here. Obviously, communication, listening skills, ethical standards, participation, all important. Next page. Critical thinking skills. You hear about that, but it's important to be able to think independently of what everybody else, the rest of the family may be thinking at that time, to make sure that all issues are being addressed before a decision is made. Next page. When we added Scott Family Services, we added this qualification to provide the direction and oversight to Scott Family Services. That's become a little bit of an issue on our last director selection that we just did. One of our directors now is a 4th generation member. who lives in New York, has never participated with anything on the family, but is very interested in learning more about it. She's separately, she writes poetry and writes books, and she's really interested in trying to come back and participate, knowing more about the family. So as the only representative of her branch, they wanted her to participate. That's fine. But do some of these younger ones have the knowledge to be able to provide direction and oversight to the enterprise of the businesses, the Scott Family Services and so forth? And that's a question, and I'll talk about that here at the end, but that's one of the things. On the communication, we've come up with calling trees, and that's become an important issue. We go through probably twice a year now and call. You're going to have a group of 4 or 5 or 6 people as the family council member. You will contact these members a couple times a year, find out what the issues are, talk about what our concerns and questions are that we have at this time, get their answers, and then we're able to come back to the family council and summarize what the direction is we should be doing or thinking along this line, whatever. Next page. The last couple slides that I have are talking about our review process that we're in the middle of doing right now. Our family council has been in place for about a 10-year period, and it's been managed by a second-generation member. We're in the process of looking at going from a second-generation member to a third-generation member. And it's been a difficult process because it's not something that you're just looking for a volunteer to do. So we decided while Jim was going to step down, he had told us he was stepping down, and while we're going through and planning this, let's take a look at everything we have with the family council and make sure that our governance structure is the right structure for what we have going forward. So for this 3-year period we started a year ago, we decided instead of having just one chair of Jim, we would have an office of the chair. It would be 2 of us. It would be Jim and myself serving together as the chair, so as a transition period. That would stop at our last board meeting, our last meeting that we had, and we would go back to an individual chair, of which I will be the chair of that. Probably that election is not until August now. We postponed it till August. But we'll now go back to an individual chair like we've had, but it will be a non-second generation person for the first time. So as we go through and review all the things that we have, what is the best structure for a third generation dominated family versus a second generation? It may be the same, it may be different, but we have 2 years to understand what the changes should look like, and we get all these changes in place so that at the end of this 2-year period, starting at this year, we will have the structure for another 10 years of what it'll look like. We'll make small adjustments to it going forward, but hopefully we'll have all of the major changes in place. One of them is the chair is there's a compensation package for the chair now. It's a very minimal salary, about $30,000, but it's never been paid before. Jim's always had the ability to do everything without being paid, but if you're going to have a next generation member doing it and giving up 30, 40, 80% of their time, can they do that and work at the same time, or should it be compensated? So we're going through and looking at all these things. Next page. As I started talking about, is the Family Council the best board to talk about family harmony and enterprise business work? If you have Family Council members that have a certain skill set or mindset about harmony, can they help to run the high-level oversight of the family businesses? Or should we have 2 different boards? And we're kind of going through that at this time. The family believes that we should have one board overseeing both of those, but we're still looking at what's the most effective, efficient way of managing both of those different groups. One of the big differences in what we've had in the past with Jim is more of an autocratic type of a manager. He will look at the calendar at the end of the meeting and say, let's make our next meeting on such and such a date. The third generation, who's never really had a lot of say and freedom in the governance part of it, because it has been a second generation, would like to say, well, let's make up our own minds on when our calendar should be. So give us the 4 dates, we'll come back, we'll give you the date we think is best, and then send out the top 2 answers from there, and we'll figure out one from that. So it's going to be a inclusiveness for the family harmony, and that's not a problem, because if it takes us a month to figure out when our next date is on the family harmony stuff, it's not as big of a deal as timeliness for business decisions. If it comes time for somebody to sell some stock, if it has to have approval, can you wait for a month to get the whole family council together and make the right decision for that individual? So timeliness versus inclusiveness between the two of them. And maybe we've got to come up with a committee to do that. We have several committees already, one on harmony and one on family leadership and development is the other one that we have. So we already have a couple of committees. Does it take another committee to do that? We need to review the membership and how they pay for it. Everybody pays one fee at this time for everything, including our family, what we call Cousins Camp. It's a 3-day deal where everybody comes into the ranch. Do we have a membership for those that want nothing more than just getting together as a family? Do they have another group that wants to use the personal and professional services, although they pay for that separately, but it's at a discounted rate? Do they pay a separate value for that? And those that are leaders and want to be participating in decision-making boards and so forth have a different fee they pay. That's something we have to think about, making sure, as Andrew said, that we have reasons for people to want to stay in the family and no reason for people wanting to leave the family. The funding sources, we have part of our funding coming from the family, part of it from the enterprise. What's the right balance for that? Now that we're a public company, we have to be very careful of having the company pay for anything that is not truly best for any other shareholder that they have, and reviewing the roles and responsibilities of what this family council and the enterprises have at this time. So like I said, right now we're in the middle of parallel planning process for the family, for our ranch, or excuse me, for the bank. We have done the ranch twice before. We've done the bank 3 times before. But this is kind of a major one because we're talking leadership at the bank also being included as a change, going from a 2nd generation to a 3rd generation or 4th generation person at some time in the future. What's that step of doing it? We have a mandatory retirement age of 72. So it does put some concerns to make sure that we have people in position, in place, respected, knowledgeable to be able to step up and step in when somebody reaches either that age or retires before that time. So that's all I had on my prepared stuff for the PowerPoint. So Andrew, I'll turn it back to you if you have any questions that you've heard about, would like to talk about.
Great. Thanks, Randy. We do have a few questions that have kind of lined up in the queue here. The first of which is just asking, what types of decisions does the Family Council make versus what types of decisions do the boards of your enterprises make? Okay.
Well, the boards of the enterprises take care of all of the enterprise business. The council does not interfere with that. The council's job is to help find the right board members, family members, to put on that board. So we are looking for the most qualified family members. So when it comes time for an election, the family will vet who, the process will go through, and it takes about 2 or 3 months to go through our process to make sure we have the most qualified people. We turn that list over to that enterprise, and they say, yes, we like that, or no, we don't like that. The independent directors on those boards are also, there's 2 of them that could be involved if we have more than one person applying for that position at the family level. So part of our review process is to have 2 independent directors as well as 2 family members and our president of our family office involved with that review process, answering questions. As some people say, it's kind of like a guillotine. It makes it difficult to want to be on a board, but we're trying to make sure we find the best people. We do not get mixed up trying to, as a family, saying, you're going to raise interest rates on CDs by 3%. That's up to the family, up to the businesses to make the decisions that they're best suited to do. We're just looking at our 4 goals of growth, risk, liquidity, and profitability, reviewing that in our parallel planning process, and presenting that to the board, the enterprise board, for their consideration. But we don't do anything that's a business decision.
Great. Another question that came in was specifically about your feed dinners.
Yes.
And the question is, how in-depth do you go into the education programs for the feed dinners? is it an open process? What's talked about in the education programs and the feed dinners
Okay.
about the enterprise itself?
Yeah, that's a good question because we've had probably 12 of these over the last 4 years. We have covered everything from the family history to the ranch history, how the family got involved with the ranch, to how the family got involved with the bank, as well as getting in more specifics about, on the bank and ranch side, we actually had an accounting, how to understand the financial statements of both the bank and the ranch, because they're both very different, the way the ranch does it compared to what the bank does. But as responsible, committed, unified, knowledgeable shareholders, they need to understand how to read the financial statements if they want to be able to do that. So we did, one of our feed meetings was on understanding those. We have to be very careful on the bank side, being a public company, that we can't treat the family any different than we do any other investor, any other shareholder. So we can't talk about future earnings. We can't talk about things that we can't discuss with anybody else. But we do talk about the goals, risk, liquidity, profitability goals that we've set up. We talk about where the bank is in performance compared to those, how their bank performance is. But it's mostly an education about what does, people have asked questions about why are interest rates so low today? So we'll have an education meeting. It's about an hour and a half. Each meeting's about an hour and a half long for the education side of it. And then we also send it by webinar to those family members that are not in those areas. But it ranges everything from family to the business side, and we ask for people's suggestions on what they want to hear about and take their advice and put the plan together from that.
Great. Another question that came in was, how do you get into a leadership position in the third generation? So what's the process that you use to develop yourself and get into a leadership position for the third generation?
Good question. We've struggled with that a little bit, not so much at the third, but at the fourth level. We have, at the bank side of it, we have 6 different third generation members that have been on the bank board at one time or another that all have not necessarily worked for the bank, but they have knowledge, education in their own personal business that, just like an independent director does, provides benefit to the overall board. The next generations are concerned, how do they feel that they can compete to get into that? And if there is somebody that has expressed interest in doing that, then we put together kind of a professional development program for them and try to help them to understand more about the banking part of it. We can't help them on their independent running that greenhouse or bar that they may have, whatever it may be, but we can help them become more knowledgeable about what takes place at the bank at that level. We have created a couple of observer roles at the bank. They have to sign confidentiality agreements, but we have 3 different observer roles that we will take one person primarily that is interested and is working towards that development, and put them, let them observe the bank board meetings, at the table. Can't ask any questions or any of that part of it, but they can be there to understand what takes place, what's going on, understand the issues, and then they can help them with their decision about whether they want to be on this board or not on this board, but helps them with that education process.
Great. One of the participants asked if you could just quickly run down what is the composition of your family council right now in terms of numbers in relation to the overall number of family members, et cetera.
Okay. I'll have to think about that as I do it. We have 1 second-generation member still on the board. I mentioned we have a retirement age of 72 for all family members for everything, and for independents as well, but we have a 65 age retirement for the family council. We have created a council of elders for those people that reach the age of 65 and are stepping off of the family council board. And they meet, it's basically the second generation. They have their own meetings about once a year to discuss what's going on. We have 9 family members on the family council. As I said, 1 of them is a second. We have 6 of them are third generation. 2 of them are now fourth generation. We have 1, 2, 3 of them are spouses of third generation members on our family council board. We have our council members. We have three of us live in Billings. One lives in Denver, one lives in California, one lives in North Carolina, and one lives in New York. So we've kind of scattered around. We're working on some technology using our bank video system, but there's some security issues with that to do video conferencing using the bank system, because that's a great system. And we're just now developing that part of it to do it visually versus by phone. But we try to get everybody together at least once a year. We meet quarterly, but we usually have a meeting in between the quarters that will be for approving the list of the board member that is going on to a different board. That doesn't necessarily take place at the same time because of timing as our quarterly meetings.
Why the different age requirements for the family council versus the board?
Because we had a second board on this council of elders for them to go to. They would still be involved with the family, what was going on, but we wanted to make sure that most of the decisions that are taking place for the family are at the average age of what the family is. Our mean age of our family is 35, I think. So we wanted to make sure that the decisions that are going forward that are taking place are by people that have the same life cycle issues that our average people are doing at the family. So we do have 2 fourth-generation members that kind of, worried about neither one has a family. They're before marriage, and so there's some issues of that about education. There's a bunch of them that are married and worried about family issues, and then there's some that are older, not working as hard. So we need to have some people representing them as well. So we do have a wide variety.
Gotcha. Another question that came in was, do you have an outside facilitator present at your family council meetings, or is it just the members of the family council?
90% of the time we do not. It is just the family council. We meet with John Ward as an example. We meet with him about once every 18 months and just kind of check in with what he sees, what the questions that we have that we need to have him involved with. We have picked up another advisor out of Utah that is primarily a transition succession person. He is about 45 years old. He is a third-generation member of a family and has been through some of these transitional succession issues. So we're looking at using him. We're just kind of starting with it, looking at using him for these succession transition issues. John Ward is there for the overall family issues, but John's going to be retiring here before long, I'm sure, so we may need to find somebody to be the overall for us. But right now, that's the combination that we have.
Great. Another question that came in was regarding the relationship between the board and the family council. Do board, the essence of the question is, how do you move forward if members of the board feel that the family council is a waste of time? So I think the question essentially is, how do you show the value of the family council to the board, and how does the board see the value in the family council?
That's a very timely question. As I said, we're doing parallel planning right now for the bank, and one of the questions that has come up is exactly that. We have some new board members that are not familiar with family businesses. They are professional board people. We have some other people as well, but they've been around for quite a while and kind of understand it. We're going through this parallel planning. We have John Ward with us right now, as a matter of fact, and our board will be meeting tomorrow. Our bank board will be meeting tomorrow, and John will be presenting to our bank board on all of the from his viewpoint, the importances of the family council, the family ownership, how it enables that long-term planning, because the family is united. They're speaking with one voice. It does not have a series of disjointed voices out there saying buy, sell, raise interest rates, do this, do that. The family will be supposedly a committed, unified, knowledgeable shareholder base that can speak with one voice and will not be confusing to the board of the bank. The board of the bank operates a little differently for a public company. It acts as a barrier between ownership and management. And in the case of a family business, the family council, it operates more as a triangle. So the family and the enterprises and the board has an opportunity to talk to each other, work together to understand what everybody's talking about and help make decisions what's best for the enterprise, what's best for the family, what's best for the ownership of the company.
Why have John deliver that message rather than maybe the family council chair?
Well, we talked about that as well too. John has the respectability from the family, and through our conversations with the family, with the business board, there's a lot of respect for his knowledge and experience at that as well. But we did want to make sure that we have, we will be talking, and on behalf, Jim and I will both be talking to the family, to the bank board. Will be part of that presentation, but this will be an outside person's viewpoint that's experienced, knowledgeable in family businesses on the importance of a family council and a family board, family ownership.
Mm-hmm. Another question, lots of questions being generated here, which is great. Another question was, you spoke about the possibility of having an independent member on your family council. Can you say more about that?
Well, it's still in the thinking stage. I know of other family councils that have done that. Right now, with 9 family members on there, we've always had 9, and we would have to either expand our board through our bylaws because it also runs the family, Scott Family Services. We would have to expand our board or reduce the number of family members on there. There was a period in time when it was difficult to find a family member interested in serving, but with all the exciting changes taking place of making changes for a third-generation dominated family, we've had a lot of interest this last time, and we've picked up 3 new board members this year. We'll have 2 more next year from board members that term out. So, you know, the independent side of it, we thought about, since we do it for everything else, it would not be in a majority of independent directors, but right now we're comfortable with where we are, but it's something that I'm probably going to push as I go forward with the chairmanship.
Another question is, how does one get on the family council, and is the family council chair the only one compensated, or do other members of the family council get compensated?
Okay. Family council chair will make $30,000 going forward for the first 2 years. The goal of this remodeling is that the family council chair can be anywhere in this country. It could be in Indiana for all that matters, you know, as far as we don't have anybody there, so we like to use the state of Indiana as a target. But the family council chair could be someplace other than being in the office all the time. Right now, it takes somebody in the office to help with the things that are going on with the Scott Family Services, to help with being close to that group, to help make decisions going forward for the family. And the family council members each make $5,000 a year, so it's a very small dollar amount as far as being paid. But we wanted them to feel that they have some sort of skin as far as accountability for what they're doing for their constituents as the rest of the family. We take open nominations every time that we have an election coming up. We send out a self-nomination, which has a series of 5 questions on it. We review with the old board that's on there what are the needs, issues that we need from a new family council member at this time, and we'll take a list of that plus our usual competencies that we're looking for. We'll combine those into that self-nomination form. We send that out with a deadline. When that comes back in, if we have more than enough people applying for it, we have a review committee to go through those, make sure that we find the people most qualified and branch representatives as well, if we can, and then present those findings to the review committee presents their findings to the family council, who reviews it, decides if that's right or wrong. They can override that review committee if they should so choose, and then they present that to the family assembly at our annual meeting that we do in April or May. and then the Family Assembly has a slate of directors, a slate of Family Council members that they will elect at that time.
Gotcha.
So we did have, like I said, we do have two fourth-generation members. The other one, by the way, lives in China right now. So, so we have a Chinese, one from China, Colorado, Denver, or California, North Carolina, and New York. So we're spread out more than the family is.
Well, our last question before we wrap up is really a very practical question about how do you get the work done on the Family Council? Is it really the chairman carrying the bulk of the work, or how do you get the work done and have accountability in terms of spreading the workload amongst the Family Council?
Boy, that is a great question. And again, that's changing as we go from a second to a third. For the last 10 years or so, in particular the last 3 that I've been involved as, I've been longer than that, but really heavily involved as vice chair, most of the decisions are being done autocratically by the chair and myself. Chair and vice chair get together and working with the Scott Family Services, decide what issues need to have a decision on, and we kind of make this is the direction we should be going. We don't necessarily make the decisions, but a lot of the work, heavy lifting, is done by the chair and vice chair, and then it's presented to the Family Council for their review and information, their input, and if they want to be involved with that. The third generation, now they have the opportunity to be more involved with the work, wants to do the heavy lifting themselves. So the chair's job is going to make sure that the projects get done and that the Family Council has chosen to do those projects themselves versus having the chair and vice chair doing that. So it's changing as we move into this next generational issue, next generational control. It's still a work to be in progress. I have a different job description than what Jim did. That will be, it's kind of been redefined several times for the last 2 years. I will have a review that takes place, an official review that will take place by a group or all of the Family Council to make sure that that's being done. That's never been done before. It will be, they'll be determining what changes need to be done as we go forward through this review part of it. But the council itself will be doing more and more of the work. At least the concept is they'll be doing more and more of the work than they have in the past, and that the chair will just be responsible for the leadership and direction of getting that stuff done.
Okay. I have one quick question that I want to squeeze
Sure.
in before we wrap up is, how are the compensation for Family Council members and expenses funded?
Well, we have 3 different pots because we have the Scott Family Services that we have to consider in there. So we put everything into 3 different pots. We have a retainer that our enterprises pay for, that anything that is business enterprise based, they will pay for that on the retainer. We have personal and professional services. That's another over a third of our expenses for tax planning, for estate planning, and so forth. And we also have a general fund that goes out to everybody. They're all allocated. Everybody has purchased 1 share of stock in this Montana corporation, but then we bill them on an annual basis to take care of the things that the others will not do. So part of our education is paid for by family members. Part of the salaries is paid for by the family members, but they pay about 1/5, 1/6 of the total cost of the family. Our total budget is about $300,000 for our Family Council and our Scott Family Services, of which we only have 2 members in Scott Family Services. So it's about $300,000 with all the work that goes into it, and that the majority of that is paid for by the personal professional services and the enterprises. So it's been one of those things. We do not have any investment arms that we have to worry about. We can get income from that. It's all paid in cash. Mm-hmm. So it is a delicate subject.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Randy, thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing your time. The number of questions that came in is really a sign of how engaging it was, so we really appreciate your helping out and sharing your story with the families. Thank you to everybody for participating, and reminder that we have 2 events coming up. Our Next Generation Leadership Institute launches September 14th and 15th. If you'd like more information, please give us a call at 312-915-6490, and we'll get you some information on the Next Generation Leadership Institute. And Randy here is a graduate of that, which is a great program. And then September 20th, we have Frank Abagnale from Catch Me If You Can. The movie was based on his life, and he's going to be talking about protecting profile and privacy in this modern world. And I know it's a concern for all of our families, and it'll be a really entertaining and engaging day. Thank you all for participating, and we look forward to seeing you September 20th and Next Generation folks on September 14th. All right? Thanks so much.